Hello everybody. Today's lesson is on concepts of learning. The objective of this lesson is to understand the concept of learning, nature and characteristics. The second objective is to know the different learning styles and dimensions of learning. Module 1: Meaning and definition. Learning is a natural phenomenon which is natural to all organisms, including both humans as well as animals. Learning affects child development. A child learns new habits only through the process of learning and through imitated traditions and customs. Intellectual skills are also developed through learning. The decision of right and wrong, the concepts of justice and aesthetic sense, etc., all these develop through learning. The process of learning continues throughout life, and learning is the basis of maturation. Not only this, learning also affects our language, our customs and traditions, our attitude and beliefs, our personality and our goals. Various psychologists and educationists have defined the concept and meaning of learning in many ways in their own way. Some define learning as a process, some as a change in the performance, and some define learning as acquisition and retention of knowledge. Now, let us see some of the psychologists' views and meaning of learning. According to Gestalt's view, the basis of learning is to gain knowledge after observing the whole structure and responding towards the entire situation. That is what he defines as learning. Kurt Lewin has presented the field view of learning and explained that learning as a direct cognitive organization of a situation, and motivation has a significant role and place in learning. According to Woodworth, the process of acquiring new knowledge and new response is the process of learning. According to Bose, he observes learning as a process, and according to him, learning is the process by which the individuals acquires various habits, knowledge and attitudes that are necessary to meet the dimensions and demands of life in general. According to Kornbach, learning is shown by a change in behavior as a result of experience. Pavlov has said that learning is a habit formation resulting from conditioning. According to Kingsley and Gary, learning is a process by which behavior is originated or changed through practice or training. And another psychologist, in words of Skinner, learning is a process of progressive behavior adoption. According to Smith, learning is acquisition of new behavior or strengthening or weakening of old behavior as a result of experience. It means instead of changing in existing behavior or acquisition of new behavior, learning may also result in discontinuous or abandonment of existing behavior. This unlearning is also learning in itself. According to Fagin, learning is a sequence of mental events or conditions leading to change in the learner. So, after knowing all the definitions from different educationists and psychologists, we can summarize that learning is a modification in behavior, learning is the organization of behavior, and learning is confirmation of new process. So, after knowing the meaning and definition of learning, now let us move to see the nature of learning. Module 2: Nature of learning. Learning is adaptation as well as adjustment. All persons continuously interact with their environment, and we often make adjustments and adapt to our social environment. Through this process of continuous learning, the individual prepares himself for necessary adjustment or adaptation. That is why learning is also described as a process of progressive adjustment to ever changing conditions that one encounters. Learning is an improvement. Learning is often considered as a process of improvement with practice or training. We learn many things which helps us to improve our performance. Learning is organizing experience. Learning is not mere addition of knowledge, it is the recognition of experience, and learning is organizing experience. Learning brings behavioral changes. Whatever the direction of change may be, learning always brings progressive changes in the behavior of an individual. That is why we are able to adjust to the changing situations. Learning is active. Learning does not take place without a purpose or self activity. In any teaching learning process, the activity of the learner counts more than the activity of the teacher. Learning is goal directed. When the aim and purpose of learning are clear, an individual learns immediately. It is the purpose or goal which determines what the learner sees in the learning situation and how he acts. If there is no purpose or goal, learning can hardly be seen. Learning is universal and continuous. All living creatures learn. Every moment the individual engages himself to learn more and more. Right from the birth of the child till the death, learning is continuous and it is happening. Learning is a process and not a product. Learning is a fundamental and lifelong process. Attitudes, fears, gestures, motor skills, language skills, etc. are the products of learning. They are not learning in themselves. In a classroom, when learning is viewed as something external, then for example, if something like shopping, people go out and buy knowledge, then it becomes their possession. So, that is a product. And according to Paul Freire, in his book The Pedagogy of Oppressed, he criticizes this and says that education thus becomes an act of depositing in which the students are depositors and the teacher is the depositor. In this banking concept of education, the teacher is the subject of learning process while the pupils are mere objects. Whereas, when learning is viewed as a process, it is viewed something internal and personal. It is something that a child does in order to understand the real world and use it as a tool for survival. So, this is about the nature of learning. Now, let us see the characteristics of learning. As we have understood that learning is growth, adjustment, organization of experience, purposeful, both individual and social product of environment. According to Metlaw, learning has characteristics. Let us see what are the characteristics of learning. Learning is a continuous modification of behavior that continues throughout life. Learning is pervasive. It reaches into all aspects of human life. Learning involves the whole process, that is personal, socially, emotionally and intellectually. Learning is often a change in the organization of behavior. Learning is development and time is one of its dimensions. Learning is responsive to incentives. In most cases, positive incentives such as rewards are most effective than the negative incentives like the punishments. Learning is always concerned with goals. These goals can be expressed in terms of observable behavior. Interest and learning, they both are positively related. The individual learns best when the things are interested in learning. Learning depends on maturation and motivation. When described in simplest possible manner, learning can be described as an experience acquisition process. In the complex form, learning can be described as a process of acquisition, retention and modification of experiences. Learning re-establishes the relation between the stimulus and response. Module 3, Learning Styles. The 4 core learning styles in work model, VARK work model includes visual, auditory, reading and writing and kinesthetic. So, let us see each learning style. The first comes visual, V for visual. Visual learners are better able to retain the information when it is presented to them in a graphic description like arrows, charts, diagrams, symbols and something similar to that. Similar to how designers use visual hierarchies to emphasize specific design elements, visual learners thrive with clear pictures of information hierarchy. That is visual learning style. The second learning style is auditory learning style. Sometimes this auditory learning style is also known as oral learners. Auditory learners, they prefer listening to the information that is presented to them vocally. These learners work well in groups and settings where vocal collaborations is present and enjoys reading aloud to themselves. That is about the auditory learning style. And then coming to the third learning style, it is reading and writing. Focus on the written words, reading and writing learners, they succeed with written information on worksheets, presentations or any other kind of text heavy resources. These learners are note takers and perform strongly when they can refer within the written text. The last one in the work model after visual, auditory, read and written is the kinesthetic. Taking physically active role, kinesthetic learners need to have hats on and thrive when engaging all their senses during the coursework. These learners tend to work well in scientific studies due to the hands-on lab component of the course. So, these are different types of learning styles. Now, let us see the different types of learning. First one is the skill learning. Right from the birth, the child acquires skill. His bodily organs learn to handle things. He moves his legs and begins to crawl. In course of time, he learns other motor skills like walking, speaking, drawing, writing, reading, playing music, cycling and swimming. So, all this type of learning is known as skill learning. Then comes the perceptual learning. The child gets the sensation through his organs of sense and he attaches meaning to each of these sensations. The earliest sensation of an infant are undifferentiated to the extent that he cannot differentiate between the object from one another. In course of time, he recognizes specific objects and perceives these separately. Indian psychologists have given an explanation of perceptual learning in different types and processes. They define conceptual learning as a sense-object contact. Pure sensation is indeterminate perception and is the first stage in perceptual learning. The second step is determinate perception, wherein the object is revealed as endowed with attributes and characteristics. The third one is the conceptual learning. As a concrete thinking leads to abstract thinking, perceptual learning is followed by conceptual learning. A concept is general idea, it is universal in character. A child sees a particular cow and forms some idea about cow with some particular characteristics. Here the ideation is on the basis of one particular cow. This particular percept, but when the child sees a number of cows with some common characteristics, he locates certain general qualities in all the cows and on the basis of these he forms the concept of cow. This is one of the basis for percept which is made general. The next type of learning is associative learning. Conceptual learning is helped by associative learning in amassing the wealth of knowledge. New concepts are tagged with the past concepts through association, and such knowledge formation happens. The fifth one is appreciational learning. While the concept learning is on affective side, a child from the very beginning utilizes his inborn traits of aesthetic sensibility and acquires concepts colored by appreciation. The next one is attitudinal learning. Attitudes, they are generalized dispositions on particular or certain concepts, things, persons and activities. A child develops attitudes of affection towards his mother, an attitude of reverence towards a teacher or any member of the family. His attitude towards play is most favorable, and all this he learns and adopts gradually. So, these are different types of learning. Now, let us move to modes of learning. Module 4, Modes of learning. Learning by observation. Observation is the basic requisite for any kind of learning to happen. By observation, here we do not simply mean seeing a thing, rather it refers to the act of perceiving and observing the stimulus. Thus, in the process of observation, we not only take the help of our eyes alone, but also we are using all our sense organs. The presence of stimulus can be recorded with the help of our capability of perceiving, seeing, listening, smelling, tasting and touching. It may be amusing or take you by surprise if it is said that we have eyes yet we are blind. Such a statement may be confusing, but it has a clarification. The point of emphasis here is that there are so many objects around us, but we take notice of only few of them. Just ponder upon the explanation and we will realize the underlying truth. In fact, we pay attention to the things that of our interest only. We can never be certain whether the interest precedes attention or its attention precedes the interest. It is because both interest and attention, these two are inseparable. Interest is feeling the side of the attention. By nature, all living things are interested in something or the other. This interest is amused by the result of impulse invoked by instincts. The greater the impulse, the more is the amount of interest attached to it, and the greater the interest, the more the attention paid to the object. Therefore, it can be said that interest is latent attention and attention is interest in action. However, the necessary conditions of both interest and attention to any object is that the mind should be organized, either innate or through experience, that it can think about the object and maintain a desire to know more and more about it. This type of mental or psychomotor activity leads us to learning about that object, and we often use attention in order to achieve the faster learning in learners. We evoke interest in children by presenting concrete objects, illustrations, pictures, modules, etc. in the class and relating the topic to them. However, this interest is a primitive in nature. We should not be satisfied with this kind of interest only. The interest can be sustained only if the learner are given an opportunity for observing new phenomena and by bringing a variety in teaching. If we try to keep their attention and old objects for a longer time, it becomes boring for them. So, if they are need to be encouraged to observe various aspects of the concept to be learned, we can help them to sustain their attention for a longer time and help them to learn more about the concept. After knowing about learning by observation, next we will see learning by imitation. Living beings, can learn a great deal by observing, but they should also try to emulate others for perfecting their performance and learning. Like observation, imitation is also an innate tendency of the child. Imitation is the tendency to repeat the observed actions of others. In the beginning, the child learns the movements, actions, gestures by imitation. The capacity of imitating is very much prominent in children, and if we observe, they take a delight in imitating. As they grow, they learn many athletic, industrial and professional skills by imitating the moving picture or demonstration of a skilled performance. The third kind of learning mode is learning by trial and error method. In many situations, we learn by trial and error method. Here, we make a number of attempts for particular task or a problem and find more attempts of rewarding. The satisfying feeling of rewards, it strengthens the particular stimulus response connection, while the unsuccessful attempts are stamped out throughout practice. This type of learning is based on Thorndike's theory of connectivism. It implies that through conditioning, specific responses are linked with specific stimuli. The connection between stimuli and response are formed through random trial and error method. The law of trial and error was formulated after experiments on a hungry cat which is imprisoned in a cage. When the cat could press the lever of the cage through several trials, it could get food as a reward. The number of unsuccessful attempts have been reduced through practice and successful attempts got strengthened. The law has significant implication in classroom learning. When used appropriately by the teacher, they can help in developing the skill and vocabulary and memorizing abilities of the children. Some of the laws of underlying to trial and error learning are law of readiness, law of effectiveness and law of exercise. With regard to law of exercise, Thorndike begins to think that reward and punishment were not equal but opposite in effect. Reward strengthens the connection considerably, but punishment does not weaken the connection to the same degree as that of rewards. The intensity and speed of reward is influencing and greater than that of the punishment. Reward also brings healthy and desirable improvement in the personality of the child. In this way, Thorndike began to give more importance to reward and prize in place of punishment or blame. The next learning mode is learning by insight. Most of the learning in human beings takes place not only through observation or imitation, but also by solving the problems which they come across in their day-to-day life. While solving the problems, the individual, they reach a solution all of a sudden, and then it can be said that learning has happened. In fact, the person reaches the solution by understanding the relation between different aspects of the problematic situation. In our daily life, we describe this mode of learning by using the phrases like seeing the point or getting the idea. So, this is nothing but learning by insight. It was actually introduced by Gestalt psychologist. Here, to understand the process of insight and learning, we describe Kohler's famous experiment of chimpanzee and bananas. For example, in this experiment, chimpanzee was placed in a cage. Outside the cage, one side were put some bananas. The chimpanzee was hungry and its long arms could not reach the bunch of bananas. Some sticks were placed near the door inside the cage. The chimpanzee first tried to reach the bananas with its hands and it could not succeed. After several attempts and failures, it sat in a corner thinking and brooding over the problem. Suddenly, it jumped and seized the stick and pulled the bananas towards itself. Kohler repeated this experiment by bringing some variations in the design. On the basis of this experiment, he describes the process of learning in insight. The learning perceives situation in its totality. The student analyzes the various aspects of situation and tries to establish meaningful relationship among them. On the basis of this new perception, the learner he redefines the situation, and the process goes on till he solves the problematic situation, and all of a sudden there will be a solution to the problem. So, these are some of the modes of learning. After understanding the meaning, definition, the characteristics and modes of learning, now let us see the dimensions of learning. Module 5, Dimensions of Learning. According to Marzano, the dimension of learning is a comprehensive model that uses what the researchers and theorists know about learning to define the learning process. Their premise is that 5 types of thinking or 5 dimensions of learning is essential for successful learning to happen. These 5 dimensions are attitudes and perceptions, acquire and integrating the knowledge, extend and refine the knowledge, use of knowledge meaningfully, and habits of mind. Let us first look at attitudes and perception. A key element of effective teaching is helping the learners to establish positive attitudes and perceptions about the classroom and about the learning, because these affect the learner's ability to learn. If learner finds the classroom as unsafe or disorderly place, their learning will be negatively affected. And also the learner's positive attitude about the classroom tasks help in learning. The second one is acquire and integrate knowledge. Providing new knowledge by integrating the previous knowledge helps in learning. When learners are learning new information, they must be guided relating to the new knowledge to what they already know and organize that information and then make it a part of their long term memory. Extend and refine knowledge. Learning does not happen and does not stop with acquiring and integrating knowledge. Learners should develop an in-depth understanding through the process of extending and refining their knowledge, that is by making new distinction, clearing up the misconceptions and reaching some conclusions. So, various reasoning processes like comparing, classifying, abstracting, inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning, constructing support, analyzing the errors, analyzing the perspectives, so etc. all these kind of things should be used by the learner to analyze the extending and refining of the knowledge. Next one is use of knowledge meaningfully. The most effective learning occurs when we use knowledge to perform meaningful tasks. So, making sure that learners have the opportunity to use knowledge meaningfully is one of the most important part of the planning a teaching activity. For this reason, the decision making, problem solving, experimental inquiry, investigation, system analysis, all these kind of topics can be used. Habits of mind. A learner becomes effective learner by developing powerful habits of mind that enable him or her to think critically or do things creatively and regulate his or her behavior. The mental habits of critical thinking are being accurate and seeking accuracy, being clear and seeking clarity, maintaining an open mind, restraining impulsivity and taking a position when the situation is warranted, responding appropriately to others, habits of preserving, pushing the limits of own knowledge and abilities, generating, trusting and maintaining own standards of evaluation enable in thinking creatively. So, today we have learned that in the simplest form, learning means acquisition of experience. In its complex form, it means acquisition, retention and modification of the experience. Learning is establishing a new relationship between stimulus and response and it means development of method of problem solving, and it is motivated by environment and includes all the activities which have a permanent effect on the individual. So, the process of learning includes acquisition of new experience, retention and synthesis of the old and new experience or information, resulting in a formation of a novel pattern of knowledge. Learning is possible both cognitive, affective and cognitive side. The acquisition of knowledge is modification of emotions and acquiring new skills. So, today we have learnt about the meaning, definition of learning, the characteristics of learning, the types of learning and the dimensions of learning. I hope you have understood the lesson. Thank you.